Here's some of the video that we're seeing, amateur video. Some of this has been posted on YouTube. Some of it has been handed over to news wires. Fires started, looting happening, clashes in the streets. We know that there are, for instance, pro-Gadhafi militiamen who are out cracking down on protesters. What we've essentially heard Gadhafi say is urging his people to civil war. He's urging them to go out to the streets and take on the protesters as we speak. Now, we've just had NBC's Richard Engel call in. Richard, give me a sense of what's unfolding around you.
Well, I think it's fair to say that eastern Libya is no longer under the government's control. I am now in the city of Tobruk, which is in Libya. There is absolutely no government presence here. I was a short while ago at a military base. These were soldiers who were formerly loyal to Gadhafi, but that once they saw that Gadhafi was using the army to attack the Libyan people, they refused to fight. They are actually handing over the weapons, including heavy weapons. I saw mortars, artillery shells, RPGs being handed out to people. This protest movement is no longer a protest movement. This is a war, and it is being treated like that. The speech by Gadhafi has not been received well in areas like this. They say they will march and continue to fight and spread from their stronghold now in eastern Libya, not far from the border with Egypt, stretching till pretty much the center of the country until they reach Tripoli, and there are widespread reports of heavy fighting going on in Tripoli itself.
Is this a well-organized defiance against the government? I mean, is there one leader or one group that represents the backlash against Gadhafi and his government?
This is a tribal society, and there are large tribes, and one by one these tribes have been turning against Gadhafi. And when the tribes move over, we're talking about tens of thousands of people or more at a time defecting and joining the resistance. So they are organized internally through their tribal leaders. There was also in this area a defection by a senior military commander, a general, who inspired the rest of his troops to defect. There have been defections at foreign embassies all over the world. There have been defections by pilots. I spoke to an Air Force officer today who was talking very specifically that the planes that Gadhafi's forces have been using to attack cities that are under the protesters' controls are not normal Libyan Air Force pilots or normal Libyan Air Force command, that they belong to an elite squadron that is paid for and loyal to Gadhafi.
Yeah, and again, yesterday we reported there were local news reports coming out of one particular region that said some 11 soldiers were executed because they had refused to fire on civilians. And again, the problem has been for us to go in and try to confirm those. I just wanted to mention, Richard, and I don't know if you're in a place where you can see it, but Gadhafi is still speaking on television. He repeatedly refers to himself in the third person. He raises his fist and he says things like, quote, "I'm a fighter, a revolutionary from tents. I will die as a martyr at the end." He says he has not yet ordered the use of force, not yet ordered one bullet to be fired. When I do, he says, everything will burn. Are his people seeing this speech?
His people certainly are seeing this speech, and I'm watching that speech right now. Communications are extremely difficult out of Libya, but there are, as you can see with my own presence, there are some journalists that are heading into this country, and more are arriving over the next several days. So there is more media presence here. The local Arabic language television stations are broadcasting this. I'm watching it right now. There's a split screen between Gadhafi's ongoing speech and ongoing demonstrations. So the Libyans are certainly aware of this. I spoke today, when you talk about defections, I saw hundreds of soldiers who had defected and who were joining sides of the protesters. Wow. They call it joining the sides of the people, giving away the weapons. There are now many, many checkpoints that are set up really throughout eastern Libya, or the parts of eastern Libya I've been able to see personally. And those checkpoints, a lot of the people who are manning them are wearing uniforms. Some of them are carrying weapons that were clearly taken from military bases. At the military bases, they are also giving out weapon, giving out uniforms to try and give the people who are on the streets a more consistent look. So this is an open revolt, and when Gadhafi says that he has not ordered violence against his people, that is something people here certainly do not believe. And I spoke with military officers who told me specifically they were given the order to attack their own people, and that's why they have refused to fight. They also talk about the use of mercenaries, wide-scale use of mercenaries. I spoke to a protester in another city a short while ago, and they have captured several dozen prisoners who belong to Gadhafi's guard, and in those among those prisoners, they were foreign African military personnel.
And Richard, I just wanted to mention the video we just saw. There was Gadhafi leaving that palace where he had given this speech. It looked as though it was the palace where the palace that had been bombed back in 1980s. Yeah, in the 1980s there, and had been left sort of as this monument to defiance and never rebuilt. And this is the place where he was giving his speech. It appeared that there was no live audience there for Gadhafi, but as he was leaving, there were then people surrounding him, and it looked like congratulating him as he left. Richard Engel reporting there from Libya. I just wanted to mention once again, back to Britain's plans for its citizens. It says that it's sending a warship to try and evacuate Britons from Libya, but at this point, Libya has not given the go-ahead for the boat to actually land and pick up these citizens. And there are governments around the world now that are scrambling to try and figure out how do they get their people out of this mess. The European Union now, the foreign policy chief there, is suspending a framework trade agreement it had been negotiating with Libya. They say that they can't continue with this because of the loss of life, because of the process of negotiating has been disrupted. Keeping an eye on that. Also, the violence in Libya, as you might well imagine, could now push gas prices globally much higher. In the United States, we could see $5 a gallon. Oil prices today skyrocketing. Analysts say if this unrest keeps spreading, Libya could be forced to cut its oil production. And just today, the biggest energy producer in Libya announced it was temporarily stopping some of its output.